right, now we have, we're going to bring Murray back actually to present some favourite client features that people are enjoying in Exo. And then we're also going to try and stump him, or Stephen Friend will, and give him those questions you've been putting through. So over to you, Murray.
Thank you, Grant. And this is the face of a nervous man. So thanks for the questions you posted in the Q&A chat. I am going to attempt to answer as many of them as I can. I've got a lot to get through in this segment. And so if I sound a little bit rushed, it's because I just want to save as much time as I can for that Q&A segment, that Stump the Consultant segment at the end. Right, so a couple of things that I wanted to talk about in terms of Exo favourite client features. And when I thought about creating this segment, I wanted to touch on features that are fan favourites for those who use them, but may not be as well known to the wider Exo community. So the couple of things that we're going to look at is using quick insert templates. Now, this creates a little bit of fear amongst some users, and so I'm going to try and demystify a little bit, and I'm going to give you some do's and don'ts, which will help to make it a success. We're also going to take a look at a segment of the distribution advantage. Now, a lot of you are aware of the stock transfer functionality that is available in distribution advantage, but we're going to take a look at how to batch process sales orders in today's segment, which is something that's possibly not quite as familiar with you. But it is, for those who use it, a great way to improve efficiencies when it comes to the whole supply side of sales orders. So without any further ado, let's get into it. In terms of quick inserts, one of the challenges that people face is that they create a quick insert and they want to import, say, stock items or debtor account details or things like that into their system. But when they go to create the file to import data, whether it's from a supplier price list or something like that, they go to load it up and it always fails and throws out errors, and they throw up their hands and then they go, too hard. The important thing is to understand what the fields are inside the table that you're importing the data into. So in the scenario I'm going to work through, we're going to import some new products, some new stock items into Exo, and I'll show you how easy it can be. Now, a real key to this, a real trick to this, is inside the Education Centre, there's actually a section here called database schemas. Now, if we go into these database schemas, and I am going to import stock items, so I'm going to click on the stock items table, it tells us what the data type is for each of the fields that we're importing. It also tells us the data length in many of the cases. So here we can see, for example, that our stock group is a number. It's an integer. This is one that often trips people up. They try and import the name of the stock group that they're trying to, that they want to update the stock item with. But that stock group is actually a number which is referenced back to another table in your database. So it's simply a case of going into Exo and taking a look at all those stock groups that you got listed out in Exo config, working out what the number is that associates to that stock group, and then import that number in, because that's what the table is expecting. It's expecting a number, not a name. So with that tip in mind, that's going to help you create those quick insert templates much more effectively. Obviously, if you get stuck, reach out to your Exo support partner. We use quick insert templates all the time when we're doing database setups, so we're familiar with them. We know all the tricks and traps. Say that 5 times. And so we can help you through that process. So how do we actually do it? Let's go to our Exo config screen. I bring up Exo config. We're going to go to our utilities, and I'm going to take a quick look at the templates. This is how we actually create them. This is our template designer, if you like. Now, MYOB Exo comes with a number of standard templates. What you're looking at here is actually that list. That's all the standard templates that are in there. But you probably want to edit the standard templates because they come with the full feature string. It's like they've got lots and lots of fields in them as by default. Another key tip with creating quick insert templates is less is more. Trying to keep the number of fields you're importing down to an absolute minimum. If in Exo, most of the fields inside a table come with a default value. So when you import data into that table, the database does the rest for you. It inserts all the default values that just need to be default values because you're not using that field, or it doesn't matter so much when you do the stock import. And so that way you can pare down the amount of fields we're actually importing. So in my example here, in my quick insert template, these are all the fields I'm going to import. And this big long list, which if I scroll down, would be all the fields that I'm not even bothering with. Some quick tips to at least for stock items anyway. It's important that you import in your GL codes. So sales, purchases, cost of sales. Make sure you populate your import table with the correct values there. Otherwise, you're going to have either errors when you import because that GL code doesn't exist, or you're going to find that the money's going into the wrong bucket. No one likes that. All right, so that's the template. This is what I'm going to be using. Now let's take a look at the data that I'm going to be importing. So I'm going to just quickly bring across, actually, you know what? I'm just going to open it up. Now, most people, when they're creating an import file, here we go, they'll just, whoops, I've got too much happening up the top here. Let's see if I can find something to double click on. I'll just drag it out and drag that across. There we go. We got there in the end, folks. We'll start with an Excel spreadsheet, and they'll simply be populating the details into an Excel spreadsheet. You'll note here are our stock groups, and they're all numbers. They're not the name of the stock group. I've got the status, and I'm importing some stock items and some lookup items. Sell prices, I'm pre-populating it with some default costs, which will potentially come from your supplier price list. Got some min-max stock values. I've got a supplier number here. So that's again the account number that's associated with the supplier that we're linking to the stock item. And if I keep going further to the right, I've got my GL code numbers as well. So once we've set that up and we're happy that we've got all the right data in there, we then convert that into a CSV file. If I drag across my little window, here I've saved it as a CSV file because the most effective way of importing data into Exo using the quick insert templates is just to grab it as a CSV file and then import that in. So how do we make that happen? If I go to our quick insert utility now, again, pick out our stock. When I open up the utility, it pulls up all of the products that we've got in our stock list already. At this stage, we don't have our stock items that we're importing in our utility yet. But before we pull them in, I'm just going to take a quick look at our options. It's important that we've got our template options set up well as well. Okay, so here, this is where I select my file that I'm importing. Include column names is an important checkbox. You may have noticed that on my spreadsheet earlier, the top row was the actual field names. So we might need to make sure we've got this tick. Comma is our delimiter. Obviously, you could use tab delimiter if you like, but the majority of people use comma delimiter CSV. I'm not copying and pasting from clipboard, so I don't need to worry about this section. And in the general section, update existing records and identity insert on, we can just leave that as default. I would make, and I will cover this off in the do's and don'ts a little bit later, but if you are planning on updating existing records, that is a little bit riskier in terms of what can go wrong. So perhaps reach out to your Exo support partner for some assistance if that's what your intention is. Okay, so I'm happy that my options are set properly. I hit data, and bang, here are the products that were on my file that I'm ready to import. Now, to update those into Exo, they're still there at the moment. It pays to just to have a quick look, a quick scan across to make sure that it all looks okay. And it looks like I've actually missed, not sure how I did that, but looks like I've missed out some of these GL codes. So I'm going to quickly update those. I can do it directly inside the utility, so I can actually type directly into the fields before I update them into Exo. So it's another little advantage that the system has. Now to put them in the system, I simply click Save. Now, if I jump into Exo and I take a look at what I've imported, just to make sure it's come through okay, just pull up a subset of the items that I've imported. Here they are. They all look good. I've got my account group set. Look, it's set as a lookup item because it's a service. Sell prices are set. There's my GL codes. Everything looks honky-dory. So that's using quick insert templates, a quick look at using quick insert templates. Now, the next thing that we want to move on to just quickly is distribution advantage and the batch sales order line processing utility. So what I'm going to do is from my drop-down menu, launch distribution advantage. Actually, before I do that, there were some do's and don'ts that I wanted to share with you first. Apologies for that. Just let me present this. There we go. So, quick insert do's and don'ts. Let's run through these. Do keep it simple. Most of the fields in the table aren't needed, so you can leave them out. There are some though, like the purchase orders. That's why I kind of showed you that. The GL codes are needed. Check the data types for each field. GL account groups, debtors and suppliers are recorded as a number, not as a name. Do test your import file and your test database before uploading it into your live and review the results carefully. Do record the steps in your process, write it down. And that way, when you come to repeat it, this next time it should be much simpler because you'll have set up your template already. You'll have your template file. You just need to use the same spreadsheet over again. But if you've got the steps written down, it'll make that next process way easier. Do back up your database before updating into live, and do use your MYOB support partner if you need help. Some don'ts. Don't purge, because that option is there. If you turn the profile on, don't purge data. Never a good idea in your live database. Don't try updating data without talking to your Exo support partner first either. Just make sure that we've got everything ticked off and we're not going to overwrite the wrong stock items, for example. Don't import your file layout without editing your quick insert template as well. We do come across this from time to time where someone's changed the spreadsheet and hasn't gone and changed the quick insert template as well. Don't let others import data without proper training. So when you've worked through this process and you've got it locked down, make sure the next person that picks up that task knows what they're doing. There you go. Some good do's and don'ts. Back to the distribution advantage. Okay, so DA actually has a number of different features in it. The one we're going to be focusing on today is the batch sales order line processing. Now, this utility allows you to quickly process a large number of sales orders through to the stage that you want them to be at. And it can be utilized in conjunction with a scanning solution, where, for example, you might want to release a whole series of orders ready for picking. So let's take a quick look at an example. So actually, before I get too carried away there, I'm just going to quickly show you. In our sales orders, we have a number of items are on back order. And what we're going to do is we're going to release and process those orders that are currently sitting on back order. Come back to DA. And so the tool I'm going to use is release stock for back orders. Now, there's a number of default settings inside this utility, but the great thing about it is that you can edit them. We won't have time today to go into the editor to show you how we can manage exactly what it does, but it's got a really cool editor where you can basically determine what's going to happen to that to those sales orders based on the rule that we're working with, or the task as they call it. So this is the one that we're going to be working with today, but I'm actually going to go quickly and show you these two options. So there are two options here. When we click new, we can create a batch from a task. Now what this will do is it will follow the rule strictly, and it will only release those lines that on a sales order that are on back order. So it's going to ignore all of the other lines, but it's going to run across all of your different sales orders and release all of the lines based on the rules that we've got set up for that task. If we choose this option, we can actually go through and pick out the sales orders that we want to release, and we can release and process all of the lines on that sales order. And so we can actually select multiple sales orders that we can perform this action for. So I'll just select those three. This is the criteria that it's using to apply to that. I hit continue. These are the lines that match that criteria. So here, this will look reasonably familiar to those of you who are involved in supplying and working with supplying of sales orders. So, you know, we've got things like our release, pick, supply, invoice quantities and things like that. Now, we can manually type these quantities in here, or we can use these tools to release all, pick all, etc., etc. So in, where was I going with that? In this database setup that I'm working with, I've enabled the extended sales order supply function. So I've got the release and I've got the pick options. If your database or if your Exo doesn't have the extended supply function set, then you'll just get supply and invoice as the two options that are available here. But what I'd like to do is set everything to supply, and then it's simply a case of processing that order. Don't want to print anything. So you want to delete batch, that's actually fine. You do want to do that just to release anything that wasn't processed because it didn't meet the criteria. So if we take a look now, we should see that, and I need to play with my example some more because I didn't pull through the lines that I was planning to. I think I grabbed the wrong sales orders. But what it would have done is process those through to partly process because I didn't invoice them out. Okay, so that's the batch sales order line processing. The example didn't go quite as well as I hoped because I didn't pick the right sales orders, but that's okay. I could have worked through that again, but we don't have time. So right now we're going to move to our next segment, which is Stump the Consultant, which is where I attempt to answer your really detailed, complex questions. And so with that, I'm going to introduce or welcome Stephen in to fire those questions away at me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Murray. I think I've got the best job today.
Yes.
I'm not quite rubbing my hands with glee, but
you
almost.
Are actually rubbing your hands with glee.
Oh, sorry, I'll put my hands down. I'll put my hands down. So look, we'll start with a job costing question that's been asked by Ingrid on our Q&A. And everybody, if you've still got some questions, if you'd still like to stump Murray, please don't hesitate to continue asking some questions in the Q&A. We might not get to them all, but if we don't, we'll actually come back to you after the session.
Yeah.
With some more details. Now, we've got a question here from Ingrid. How do we bring back stock into location 1 from our WIP location once a product has been purchased with the job and invoiced on another sub-job? Now, this is for those clients that are using job costing. We'll be using jobs as well as sub-jobs, and just how we manage the migration of stock from WIP back into location 1. Do you want to tackle that one, Murray?
Sure. I guess, Ingrid, the first thing I would ask is if the job's been invoiced out, why are you trying to bring stock back into location 1? Is it because it hasn't been used on the job? So yeah, we need to understand why you're trying to bring it back in first and why it hasn't been consumed as part of the process of the job. But if there are valid reasons for doing it, then it may well be a 2-step process. And step 1 would be to cancel the line. Now that'll bring it back into stock. Now, but it won't, because you've specifically mentioned location 1. Now, the product, if you've purchased it onto the job, potentially hasn't been not brought into that location. So the important step though first is to cancel the line so that we're clearing the job out, and so that product isn't just sitting there on the job still. So when you run your WIP report and job costing, that's looking okay. The next potential step in the solution, if the stock isn't coming back into a default location, then you may need to do a stock transfer to move that stock from the location it's been brought back into location 1, and you're going to just use the quick transfer functionality for that. So I hope that answers your question. And yeah, so with a I guess a question at the start around what the process needs to be, or what the process is for why that stock is still sitting on the job.
No, that's great, Murray. I'm sure, Nadia, if there's any sort of further questions, just reach out and we can put you in touch with either Murray or one of our other consultants to talk that through. Now, just a question here from Nadia for you, Murray.
Yep.
Why have the SMTP server setting editing options identified per user login been removed or hidden in some of the newer versions? Nadia's trying to go to do a mail shot and wants to configure her SMTP settings. And of course, if you make a mistake, there's no way to access those settings to adjust them.
Yeah.
You want to bring up the SMTP server settings, Murray?
Yeah. So Nadia, I'll show you the way that I edit SMTP server settings in Exo. Now, there may be a smarter way of doing it than the way I do it, but this is the way I do it. So I'm going to go into a debtor account, and I'm going to find an email. I'm going to find an invoice, and then I'm going to choose to email that invoice. Now, just a word of warning: make sure you don't have the settings configured that send the email immediately. You want to turn that off so that we're not sending the email immediately. We want to preview the email first before we hit send, because we don't actually want to send the email. We want to go in there and configure the SMTP settings. Now, so this is on a user by user basis. So you want to be doing this on the computer of the user that you want to edit the SMTP settings for. Okay. So if I go to email invoice, it pops up and says, hey, you need to configure this because it's not set up yet. And I don't have SMTP settings in here. But if I did, it would pop up with a little email window. Inside that email window, there'll be an option to configure SMTP settings. There'll be a button at the top. That's how you do it. So it's a little bit of a workaround, but when it comes to configuring SMTP server settings, this is the way I've always done it.
Fantastic,
Okay,
Murray. Thank you for that. Next one.
Right here it is there. Bang. That's the one. Next one.
Next one. We've got a question from Ivan. Exchange variances and period posting. When is the best time to run or post variances?
Okay. Let's go into our ledger posting screen. And first thing to note is we've actually got, they've brought a lot of the FX management into the ledger posting screens. So if you're not on this version, or what did they bring it in? It's probably about 2018 or 2019. They brought the FX stuff into the ledger posting screen. But we've got to maintain currencies here, so you can actually edit your currencies within the ledger posting screen. If I expand out our debtors and creditors, you can see we've got our realize FX gains and losses as a checkbox inside the ledger screen. So this is for realized gains and losses, so where payment has been taken or payment has been made, so we're realizing the variance. So that's already built right into the ledger posting screens. Obviously we can control all of these. We can untick that and then we can save that as our default setting if you don't want to run it as part of the ledger posting, but you can run it as whenever you're posting ledgers to the GL. Now, in terms of your unrealized FX gains and losses, you run that as part of your month-end process. So normally you would do it after you post your debtors and your creditors through to the GL, and then the next step in the process would be to take up your unrealized FX gains and losses before you roll over into the new year. So hopefully, Ivan, that answers your question. Yeah.
A good one here from Hugh. Fact or fiction, Murray? A primary key is unique, but not sequential.
A primary key is unique, but not sequential. A primary key is unique, not necessarily sequential. Next.
There you go. Fun fact. Next one here, we've got a good question from Delphine in terms of how we manage history notes. Of course, when you create a new history note, it states the date and time and staff member who created that note.
Yeah.
But the note can be edited by any other staff member. It's a way to lock these notes so others can only amend notes that they previously entered.
Yes. They can't, sorry, I'll put a proviso on there. You can lock history notes from being edited once they're entered. You can't lock it so that only one person can go in and edit them. So let me pull up Exo config. If I go to profiles, hopefully this works. So here you've got these profile settings that allow you to either allow you to control who, and this is a user profile, so again it's on a user by user basis, who can delete a history note, who can edit a history note, who can edit the date stamp on a history note. So, but it is a little bit of well, it's not an all or nothing because it's a user profile. So you could have some users that are allowed to do this, and you have some users that are not allowed to do it. But what you can't have is a history note where the person who made the history note is allowed to edit it, but no one else is. That's, as I understand, it's not a feature.
How do extra fields work with analysis codes? Okay,
that is an easy one to start with. The answer is they don't. So analysis codes, they're a feature all of their own. And so analysis codes run, the configuration of analysis codes is separate to extra fields. So if you're trying to get extra fields to work with your analysis codes, we may be able to do some customization. If you say select a particular analysis code, you want a particular extra field to be updated, that we can do. We can create something that'll do that update automatically for you. But in general, they're two separate features.
Yeah, fantastic. Correct answer. All right, very good, very good. Now, another question here, great one from Karen. Can an extra field type of memo be added?
Yes.
In a field with more than one line of text?
Karen, you didn't watch last year's user group forums, did you? I actually covered that off in a previous segment. And yeah, absolutely. So you can make it a larger text size, and it looks and works just as you would expect. Obviously, it takes up a little bit more real estate space on the screen, but works perfectly. And it has spell checker.
Great new feature. Another question here from Rod. How do upgrades affect extra fields? Will our extra fields change after an upgrade due to the new layouts?
Yeah. There was a version that was released where that introduced some extra field changes, and there were some issues with that one release where it did mix up some of the extra fields that came out. Fortunately, it was picked up on very quickly. We moved all the clients that upgraded onto it straight off it. Happy to say that right now, no. The answer is your extra fields and the layout of your current extra fields won't change when you upgrade to these latest versions.
Yeah. Now, another question here. Can I show, another one from Jackie, leading on, we're having a bit of a conversation here, Murray. Can I show analysis codes in the general ledger when looking at transactions for a specific account? For example, add it as a column to the transaction grid.
Yes, I believe you can, Jackie, but I'd need to test it, to be honest with you. I think the answer is yes now. Analysis code is going to be added to transactions inside the GL. But yeah, I would actually need to go and just double check that I'm right there before I give that the 100% seal of approval.
Fantastic. Now we are running a little bit short on time, so we might just make it 2 more, Murray. So, one from Richard. Do the extra fields and stock items slow the system down? You will recall we put in Framework Runner a few years ago as a workaround.
Thanks, Richard, for the free promo of Enterprise Framework Runner. I appreciate that. And your instance, yes, it absolutely did. There was a unique set of circumstances that led to that happening. There was a very high number of extra fields, as you'll recall, and a high number of those extra fields had lookup references. So they were actually looking up different tables. And I might be wrong, Richard, but I even think some of them were looking up a different database as well. And it was a combination of the two that was slowing everything down. So yeah, by pulling those out, putting them into Framework Runner, and I'm pretty sure we simplified some of those so that they weren't looking back through to other tables or views, and just store the data against the table. That's what sped your system up.
And one more, another great one from Karen here. Is the get best price function in sales orders editable, or is it locked by MYOB?
Is the get best price function in sales orders editable? So when you say get best price, you're talking about the price policy. So you can edit a price policy, and you can edit the price within the sales order. Or am I missing the question?
I suspect she might actually be talking about asking about the logic that calculates what's the best price. And I know you can alter the get best price stored procedure as well if you actually want to. So if it's not a combination of editing the price policies or actually some front-end work, Karen, yes, you can actually alter the logic drastically if you really want to. Very, very dangerous stuff. Murray's your man if you need to do such wizardry.
Karen, was that a stumping? I think it might have been. I didn't understand the question.
That's great. Well, look, I think we've run out of time, Murray, so we might have to call it there.